Fat Literature with hosts Natalie Handel and Gabrielle David at the Langston Hughes Library. Coming up next on Fat Literature, John Watusi Branch, Executive Director of the Afrikan Poetry Theater in Jamaica, New York, talks about the center's long history and its impact in the literary community, featuring visual artists Otto, Neals and Abdul, Badi. Funding for Fat Literature has been provided by the Langston Hughes Community Library and Cultural Center of the Queensborough Public Library and its funders. Additional funding for Fat Literature was also provided by the Intercultural Alliance of Artists and Scholars Incorporated and its funders. Fat Literature's website is made possible in part by Queens Council on the Arts, with support through J.P. Morgan Chase Arts and Culture Regrants Program. With special thanks to our individual donors and viewers like you.
To be or not to be? That's not the question.
It's fact.
It's fact. It's fact. It's fact. It's fact. It's fact.
It's literature. It's poetry. It's the spoken word. Diversity for all to hear. It's fact.
It's fact.
Fat literature.
I can't imagine Queens without the Afrikan Poetry Theater. It's been around for how many years now?
28 years.
28.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that it started, I think, in the 60s.
Well, no, it actually started in the 70s, the early 70s. However, many of us who started it, we come out of the period of the 60s that was an explosion of black art. It was the black arts movement, the black consciousness movement, and it was a period of time when black folks began to recapture some of the beauty of what it means to be African, and so there were many artists that emerged during that period. There were many cultural styles. Poetry exploded during that time, many cultural centers and began to spring up during that period. It's a very important period, the 60s. And so many of us came out of that period and we began to get involved with the cultural movement in many ways. And so myself being involved in several of the organizations at that time, and eventually the co-founder, the late Yusuf Waliyaya, poet and real great cultural specialist, and myself, well, we began what was called the Afrikan Poetry Theater, actually ensemble, an ensemble of poets, musicians, and singers, and
you performed together.
Oh yeah, we performed all over the place, many things, and
Some of those names are, I think, some of those names in that group are pretty well known now, or something.
Well, most of them were musicians. There were some poets like Umar Ben Hassan from the Last Poets that used to perform with us. But myself and Yusuf Waliyaya were the poets. We had some singers. We had some musicians that were pretty well known, like Kimati Denizulu played with us for a number of years, master drummer. You know, eventually performing for various communities, that we begin to settle down and create a permanent space so that the poets and the musicians can gather. And so we began to do readings and workshops and lectures.
Like educational.
Yeah, educational.
How has it, like, how has things evolved? Not only within the community from the past 28 years, but you know, in just, you know, the influences and that these poets have had, and these musicians during that time, that political, socio-political context, and the one we have now, and how it's evolved over the last, you know, almost 3 decades.
Yeah, well, it has evolved even with the beginning programs like the literary and programs and the information programs like the lectures. I mean, we have exposed a lot of people to some of the information, some of the great scholars that have come through the Afrikan Poetry Theater. Internationally known, the first time in Queens, the place used to be so packed with people that was hearing this information for the first time in a local community like this. You would think that you would get this information from some of the big universities, but you found it in the community. And so that was a great influence on the community. And of course, to have a space for the writers to come to the open mics was just a great experience. Open mic to give the community writers a chance to express. And then we began to expose a lot of the writers to what we call the literary tribute to the elders, where we began to tribute great writers like Margaret Walker and Gwendolyn Brooks and Dudley Randall, Ruby Dee, Sonia Sanchez, and Midi Baraka, Askia Torre. These people were a part, and Margaret Walker and Gwendolyn Brooks would go back to the Langston Hughes era. However, the other poets came out of that 60s period, the Black Arts Movement. So we started honoring these people at places like Columbia University, City College, and involving a lot of the local poets in it. So they were around all these great masters, you know. And of course, it helped to develop their skills,
and
you know.
Inspire, too.
Right, sure.
Just to sort of give them,
Right.
you know.
And then in addition to that, we began to expand our programs. You know,
In what way? I mean, it was strictly artistic endeavors. See now that the programming you're doing a lot of community-oriented services in terms of job training.
Exactly.
How did you evolve from that point to this point? Did you see
Is it because of this, the way that also the community has
Yeah, the
changed?
community. The communities, when people came with programs, and then the broader picture is looking at the cultural center as a place to gather, to organize the people, and people bring ideas in. So we took the ideas, some worked and some didn't. We had day camps, rites of passage programs, which is really a social development program. And so the rites of passage for male and female is a very important program to try to prevent the youth from going the wrong way and giving them a sense of history, giving them an understanding of what it is to become a man or a woman. You just don't spring from a child into a man or a woman. There's a period of time, there's a period of training. And so our rites of passage gives them the opportunity to learn many things. And so when they physically become of age, you know, and they feel that they're men and women, at least they have something to go along with that. Yeah. So the Rites of Passage was a very popular program, still is. And then, as you mentioned, the Youth Employment Program, so reaching out to the neighborhood youth. And so the Youth Employment Program not only gives them an opportunity to make a few dollars so that they can buy their books and clothing for school, but it trains them to understand what it is to have a job and to work, to be committed to a job. And the exposure with the Afrikan Poetry Theater also gave them a sense of history and culture.
Of course, and right. I'm sure you've emphasized reading, because I think the problem we've had in the United States today is that we don't read enough, and we don't read in the schools. We don't have that, and also the variety of the reading lists. You know, it's always the same writers, and we don't see the large scope of things and all the other experiences and these different youths. When they read various writers, they can see themselves within, you know, all those different experiences.
Right. So yeah.
So